All right, let's finish up this chapter. Let's finish up 5.3. We are going to look at total effect. We are going to, see total effect as, let me change my color. Let's try red. We are seeing total effect, so this is T, right? Total effect equal the substitution effect plus the income effect, right? We will look at that graphically. We will see the interpretation of that relationship. We will try to decompose the total effect into two parts, and as you can see, I did some work so that this one goes fast. And then we'll summarize what we are doing. I'll jump into that later. Item 6, we'll see that the size of the substitution effect depends on curvature, and I've done some work and we'll get through this. And we'll see that the size of the income effect depends on the budget share, and we will bring things to an end. All right, so we have a full plate. We have a full plate on this one. Let's get started. Total effect. The total effect. When we see a fall in price, what does that look like? So I'm working on 1 and 2 now. Let me change my color back to black so I can draw the graph. Let's take good X on the X-axis. As usual, good Y is on the Y-axis. We start with our budget line looking like that, and let's call this budget line BC1, okay? And then we'll draw another budget line. I'll try to use a different color this time. We'll draw another budget line so that it is rotating outward. Let's call that BC2. So BC2, and in black, BC1. BC means budget constraint, Okay, so BC1 and BC2. All right. Well, on BC1, we notice that there is a tangency point right here. There is a tangency point. I'm drawing it so that it's just tangent to BC1. There's a tangency point right here. We will call that point A. We will call that point A. Let's draw point A out here. Okay. When there is a price decrease, there is a rotation outward in the budget constraint such that we get a new budget constraint, BC2. So we see a rotation outward because only the price of good X fell. From the drawing, that should be obvious that there's a rotation from BC1 to BC2 because the price of good X fell. All right, so when the price of good X fell, changing my color to blue now, when the price of good X fell, there was a movement from bundle A to bundle B. So the utility level there is U2 and the prior utility is U1. Okay, cool. So again, what is happening? First, there is a drop in price of good X. We understand that. And when there's a drop in the price of good X, the budget constraint rotates outward from B1 to B2, such that the optimal bundle changes from bundle A to bundle B. Drop in price of good X, budget constraint or budget line rotates outward BC1 to BC2, and the optimal bundle on BC2 is now, well, is bundle B. There is a movement from bundle A to bundle B, is what I'm getting at. That movement from bundle A to bundle B is known as the total effect. Right, so in red, yes, in red, movement from bundle A to bundle B is total effect. So let's go back to our agenda. So let me scroll up just a smidge. What did we just do? We saw that mathematically, well, we will see that mathematically, the total effect is written as the substitution effect plus the income effect. Okay, but all we just saw was the total effect. Good. So we are almost there, right? But we did see graphically a fall in price, and we did see the total effect. So what is the total effect? The interpretation of the total effect goes like this. There is a change in consumption choices. Really, there is a change in the optimal bundle due to a change in relative prices. Relative prices, yes. There was a drop in the price of good X. But from the drawing, it implied that the price of good Y stayed the same. Do you remember that? From section 5.1, right? If you haven't seen that, you should go and see it before you look at this one. Okay, so there is a change in consumption or in the optimal consumption choice due to the change in relative prices. What I mean is because the price of good X fell, we see a movement from bundle A to bundle B. That was what we saw in the drawing a few minutes ago. You can go back and look at it. Now, that total effect is the sum of the substitution effect, SE, right? Substitution effect. Let me write that out. Substitution effect. The total effect is the sum of the substitution effect and the income effect. Okay. What is the substitution effect? Well, when the price of good X falls, as consumers, what we do is we substitute towards the cheaper good or the relatively cheaper good and away from the relatively more expensive good. That's what we do as consumers in the stores, right? Yeah. So what is the income effect? The income effect is a change in the consumption choices because there is a change in purchasing power. When you go to the store and prices fall, you feel richer. And so in item 4, we are going to decompose the total effect on the graph. What does that entail, decomposing the total effect? Well, and into how many parts will we decompose the total effect? Into 2 parts, into the substitution part and the income effect part. The substitution effect part and the income effect part. We will do all of this on the graph. So, how do we do that? Well, we can isolate the substitution effect by muting the income effect. And how do we do that? To isolate the substitution effect, where the consumer is substituting away from the relatively more expensive good to the relatively cheaper good, we show that by maintaining the price change. and maintaining the initial utility level. So to maintain the price change, we will draw or manufacture a budget line that is parallel to BC2. And we will take that parallel line and make it tangent to the initial utility level. When we make that manufactured budget constraint tangent to the initial utility level, we have muted the income effect and thus isolated the substitution effect. Take a minute and look at this, or pause the video and look at what I have written here, because that's what I'm going to do on the graph that we started with. Okay, so we are back to the graph. We are going to manufacture a new budget constraint. We'll call it BC star star. We will draw that new budget constraint such that it is tangent to BC2. Such that it is parallel to BC2 but tangent to U1. So let me do that. I'll take that again, right? Because I misspoke just a few minutes ago. We will draw a manufactured budget constraint parallel to BC2 and tangent to U1. So here we go. I'm going to need my ruler for this. That way I can use the ruler to guide how I draw. Whoops. Oh, sorry. To guide how I draw this out. Okay. So, well, oh, there we go. This is going to be good. Is that tangent? Trying to keep it 35 degrees. All right, cool. So we will use the red ink, and my ruler is gone. Oh, it's back. We will use the red ink to attempt to draw this. Oops. Oh yeah, it's gonna work. Good. There we go. That was easy. I knew I could do it. This manufactured budget constraint, and I should drag it down a little because it's too high up. Yeah. I almost had it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. There. I think this should work. Okay. So our BC, that is BC star star. BC star star is tangent to U1 right there. Let's call that point C. Tangent to U1 at point C. And that BC star star manufactured budget constraint is parallel to BC2. Two parallel lines have the same slope. And so this BC star star is still reflecting the drop in price of good X. Okay? Yet we draw it tangent to the initial utility level in order to mute the income effect. All right. And so from here, what has happened? Here's what has happened. The movement from bundle A to C is the substitution effect. And the movement from bundle C to B is the income effect, C to B. However, we know that the movement from A to B is the total effect. And our job here was to decompose that A to B movement into the two parts, A to C, and then C to B. And we've done it. Now, let me add in okay, and the one for good A. So you can see that with the substitution effect, you consume more of good X and less of good Y, right? Because you are substituting away from the now relatively more expensive good to the now relatively cheaper good. So let me put some numbers to it, some fake numbers, all the same, but it should help us. So 10 here, and then let's do 8. So we see the movement from A to C along the good Y axis as a drop in the unit of good Y that is consumed. And let's do this 5. Oops. Let's make this 7, and in black let's make this 5. Right, and then we also see the total effect, so we will use blue. Let's make this 12, and let's make this 11. All right, so when you move from A to B, you consume 12 units of good Y, right? A to B, 12 units of, 2 additional units of good Y. When you move from A to B, you consume an additional 2 units of good Y. And when you along the Y axis, and when you move from A to B, you consume 6 units, an additional 6 units of good X. However, that's the total effect. However, there is the substitution effect, such that because there's a drop in the price of good X, you consume 2 fewer units of good Y. That's A to C, and you consume, I'll use red for this one, and you consume an additional 2 units of good X. So for the substitution effect, you're consuming 2 fewer units of good Y, but 2 additional units of good X. And now the income effect, right? The income effect is C to B. For C to B, you consume an additional 4 units of good X. And then C to B, the income effect, you consume an additional 4 units of good Y. I'm going to write that down. In case people got confused about what I was doing. Okay, so let me get rid of all of this, and we'll do it again together. Oh yeah, we have nothing but time, right? So we'll be fine. Okay, so total effect A to B, right? Good Y, good X. Total effect A to B. A to B, for good Y, it was 10 to 2, right? From 10 to 2. From 10 from 10 to 12. Yeah, so plus 2 units of good Y. Total effect along the x-axis from A to B along the x-axis 5 to 11. So from 5 to 11. So that is an additional 6 units of good X. Okay, that makes sense. We understand that. What about substitution effect? I'll use red for that one. So substitution effect, good Y and good X, right? Okay, substitution effect, good Y and good X. Let's work this for good Y first, since that's at the top. A to C. A to C, there is a drop. So from 10 to 8. From 10 to 8. And that is minus 2 units of good Y. We consume 2 fewer units of good Y. And then along the x-axis, A to C, we go from 5 to 7. From 5 to 7. So along the x-axis, we gained 2 units of good X. That's good, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to use green now. Income effect. Good Y. Good X. Okay, income effect goes from C to B. Along the y-axis, C to B is 8 to 12. So from 8 to 12, that's an additional plus 4 units of good Y. And then for good X, C to B, 7 to 11. From 7 to 11, that's an additional plus 4 units of good X. Let's write that better. Plus 4 units of good X. Good. All right, let's go back up to the agenda and see what we have done so far. Okay. We have mathematically written out the total effect as the sum of substitution effect and income effect. We have shown graphically a fall in price of good X. And we have gone through the interpretation of total effect as the sum of substitution effect and income effect. We said that the substitution effect is where consumers substitute away from the more expensive good to the towards the cheaper good. And the income effect is when consumers feel richer if the price falls, right? So they see an appreciation in their purchasing power and therefore a change in their consumption choices. Now, consumers feel richer, yes. They feel richer such that they reach a higher utility level. You see, when you move from A to B, and that's the total effect, you reach a higher utility level. U2 is at a higher level than U1. See, that's what we mean by feel richer. And that's why the income effect is from C to B. The pure income effect is from C to B, where you hit or reach a higher level at B. Okay. So we've done that. And then we went ahead to decompose the total effect into 2 parts. Isolating the substitution effect is the same as muting the income effect. And we mute the income effect by manufacturing a budget constraint that is parallel to the budget constraint BC2. And we draw that parallel budget constraint to be tangent to the initial utility level. Remember, the income effect is seen when you hit a different utility level. So whenever there's a drop in price, you will hit a higher utility level. And whenever there's a price hike, you will fall down to a lower utility level. Now, in this case, we are looking at a drop in price, and so we are reaching a higher utility level. So to mute the income effect, you need to remain at the initial utility level, but maintain the changed prices, which is why your manufactured budget constraint has to be parallel to BC2. All right. So we've just done that. Okay, I'm going to take you through the slides. Oops. Let's go all the way to 5.3. All right, so in the slides, here is the total effect. They have different numbers. They do talk about isolating the substitution and income effect, just as I did. And they show that graphically. They use different notation, but they show that graphically. And so you can follow this. You can pause the video so that you can read the slides, which is why I'm taking it slow through the slides. That way, those who are not in my class and so don't have access to the slides can pause the video and see the slides. Okay. And the steps for isolating the substitution effects or muting the income effect, right? It's all here. Okay, we are ready to go back down to the agenda that I showed you earlier. Okay, in summary, did you notice that there is a drop in income? What do I mean by that? When you look at BC2 and BC ***, do you notice that it looks like a drop in income, which is sending us down from the blue budget constraint to the red budget constraint? Yes. I hope you can see that. Well, what has this got to do with anything? How do we interpret that, right? What has this got to do with anything? A drop in income. Well, the difference between BC2 and BC *** is the income that you take away from a consumer after prices fall, such that the consumer is as well off as they were before the price fell, such that the consumer remains at their initial utility level, U1. Now, this is known as the Hicksian Compensating Variation for a drop in price. So, you should be asking me a question right now. I mean, I can't hear you, but I hope you have this question in your head. What if we had worked on a price hike instead? Then, the difference between the manufactured budget constraint and the budget constraint due to the hike in price will be the income that we give the consumer for experiencing a hike in price, such that we return the consumer to their initial utility level before the price hike. That will be the opposite of this. Now, that will be known as Hicksian compensating variation for a hike in price. But with this example, or with this scenario that we are painting, it is the Hicksian compensating variation for a drop in price. When there's a drop in price, we could tax the consumer to take some money away from them or to reduce their income such that the consumer feels exactly as well off as they were before the price fell. What impacts the size of the substitution effect? Well, it depends on the curvature of the indifference curve. So I set this up here so we work through it. Indifference curves can be perfectly straight, almost straight, curvy, or L-shaped or Leontief. If you have perfectly straight indifference curves, then the goods are perfectly substitutable, right? Goods are perfectly substitutable. The slope of a perfectly straight indifference curve is the same everywhere along the line or along the curve. The slope of a perfectly straight line is the same everywhere along that perfectly straight line. This means that the slope of the indifference curve, which is the marginal rate of substitution, MRS, is also the same everywhere, right? Also the same along the straight line, or the straight indifference curve. The straight IC, how about that? Okay. You have a perfectly straight indifference curve, meaning that the goods are perfectly substitutable. So the substitution effect should be the largest. The substitution effect should be the largest for perfectly substitutable goods. Large as it can be. When you have almost straight indifference curves, the goods will be close substitutes. The slope will be almost the same everywhere along that almost straight line. The marginal rate of substitution, which is the slope of the indifference curve, will not change quickly along that almost straight line. It will be almost the same, right? And the substitution effect will be big. For a curvy line, or for a curvy indifference curve, the goods are close complements. You can always almost see where this is going. The marginal rate of substitution, which is the slope of that indifference curve, changes quickly. Along the indifference curve. and the substitution effect is small, yeah, the substitution effect of close complements will be small. Now, when you have Leontief or L-shaped indifference curves, the goods are perfect substitutes. The slope changes quickly, and therefore the marginal rate of substitution also changes super quickly. Actually, I'll do a little detour so you see what I'm talking about. And the substitution effect is 0. Oh, look at what I did here. Perfect complement. Perfect complement. The goods are perfect complement. So perfect complements, goods that are perfect complements can't be substituted, right? Yeah. So the substitution effect of that is 0. Now, I was saying that when you have an L-shaped indifference curve, one that looks good X, good Y, and this is the little detour, and you have this L-shaped indifference curve at point A. Well, you have point A, point B, A, B in the vertex or in the kink, and C here. At point A, the marginal rate of substitution is infinity. At point B, the marginal rate of substitution is undefined. And at point C, the marginal rate of substitution is 0. It changes quickly from infinity to undefined to 0. I may insert a video at some point to explain why or how I know that the marginal rate of substitution changes this quickly along an L-shaped indifference curve. I think you could work that out yourself, but at some point, no promises, right? No guarantees, but at some point I'll put a video out. So let's go through this again. The size of the substitution effect, if your indifference curves are perfectly straight indifference curve tells us that the goods are perfectly substitutable. And so the substitution effect for that will be the largest it can be. Now, when you have almost straight indifference curves, that means that the goods are close substitutes and the substitution effect is quite big. When you have curvy indifference curves, the goods are close complements, and so the substitution effect is small. When you have L-shaped indifference curves or Leontief indifference curves such that the goods are perfect complements, substitution effect for that is 0. Because, well, perfect complements can't be substituted with one another or with each other. What about the size of income effect? The size of the income effect depends on the budget share. And so, if that budget share is small, then the income effect will be small after a price change, right? Your example here will be toothpaste. When the price goes up for toothpaste, the income effect of that should be small, because by how much would it go? Toothpaste already costs maybe $4, and so it goes up an additional $1. The share of the budget is still small for toothpaste. So small budget share, small income effect. and large budget share, large income effect after price change. Okay, and it seems that's the end of 5.3. I'll go back up to the slides for 5.3. I know I stopped somewhere here, 6 out of 16, and so I will go through 5.3. That way people not in our class can benefit from, pausing to read the slides. Okay, sorry about that. It might be easy to do this, but I don't think so. Okay, the rest of everything I did not cover in 5.3, I will do so in class. As I have more time, I will go back in here and pick some other interesting topics that people in the YouTube streets might find useful, so I can create a video over that. I'm trying to keep this video under, hopefully, under 40 minutes, and hopefully I was able to do that. Okay. Thank you for a good class. Like and subscribe. It really helps if you hype the video so more people can see it and learn from this. Okay, thank you for spending the time with me, and Dr. T is out. She's out.